This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at thebatmanuniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest TVU podcast. I'm Dustin, joining me today is BJ, and today we are talking about the recently released Catwoman Hunted. This is the latest animated movie from Warner Brothers Animation. It's not part of the main line, which is not really a main line anymore because they're not interconnected like they used to be, but it's not one of the three films that we expect. It's kind of like the offshoot. So last year they had Batman Soul of the Dragon. The year before that they had Batman Ninja, I believe. So this one is kind of like the offshoot of trying something a little bit different, a little bit more experimental with the animation style than we've seen in some of the normal animated films that we've seen. And I say normal, but honestly, because they've dived outside of a normal continuity timeline, and they've done other storylines. Last year they did Long Halloween, they've done The Dark Knight Returns, they've done a bunch of different storylines that aren't necessarily part of a normal continuity, and now they're kind of stepping away from that anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. But that said, this film finds a unique spot amongst all of these animated films where it doesn't separate itself from any of the films from the past, but doesn't necessarily connect itself either. There's a lot of stuff going on. The basic overview of this is that Catwoman is kind of facing off against a reimagined version of Leviathan, which some may say could just be like a introduction to Leviathan. And she ends up getting teamed with Batwoman along with Julia Pennyworth and King Faraday as part of Interpol, and they are trying to take down Leviathan, and she kind of gets the best way to put it is she gets extorted into having to help them out in taking down Leviathan, specifically Barbara Minerva, who is, as we know, is Cheetah, who's currently the leader of Leviathan. Along the way, we come in contact with some other characters that we're familiar with. Tobias Whale. We also see Black Mask. He's got a very prominent role. But the film actually starts off in what can only be described as a costume party that the characters are dressed as superheroes and villains, and surprisingly, you could assume that there's cameos from a wide variety of different characters, but in reality, it's a wide variety of characters in costumes, so it's like costume cameos. But we see Riddler. There's a Penguin. There's too many to name, but there's a bunch of different characters that are from the Batman universe. There's characters like Black Lightning and Wonder Woman and Supergirl that pop up in there too. So this is kind of a cool thing to see. Catwoman actually first appears in the film with her classic purple dress costume from the Golden Age. And then she hastily changes into her more modern day costume as she attempts to steal a jewel that Black Mask transported as his way of getting into the Leviathan group. So talking about, like, let's say the first act before we kind of get to Selina having to team with Batwoman, what did you think of the setup, the costume party, her skills being shown as she tries to steal the jewel, and then that entire action sequence at the end of the first act where she's in that giant car chase against all of the the henchmen, along with Tobias Whale, as she tries to basically have her getaway.
Perfect setup for a Catwoman movie, right? You see Catwoman, you know she's going to be stealing something or attempting to steal something. So it's a perfect setup where it's into the party, because we don't know right off the bat that it is. We assume that it's Catwoman, our Catwoman, but it's not presented to us. It's just a woman showing up in the party, coming in with black mask and the Catwoman costume from like the Silver Age, like you said. So she does that. She's mingling with all the guests, flirting. She goes up to like a kind of a stocky fellow dressed as Batman and kind of flirts with them for a little. And she sneaks off, changes into her normal Catwoman costume, does the classic, stuff like the lasers with like smoke or whatever. You see that in almost probably in every heist movie ever. Figures a way around that. Jewel gets into, and then all of a sudden, I didn't think that everybody at that party was going to be armed, some type of weapon. I figured she'd just take on the Tobias Whale henchman, but I guess it was everyone at that party who was not happy to see Catwoman. Escape them, and yeah, the car chase was pretty cool. I really I'm not the biggest fan of that anime type style. Maybe Batman Ninja maybe kind of put me in bad taste in my mouth about it, but this was more toned down than Batman Ninja, and I really liked the action. The car chase was pretty wild. The guys were coming off that cliff left and right, and they went into that town. I guess no one lives in that town at all, because it seemed to be just them on the road, which I'm fine with. Action beats. What did you think about it?
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy how everybody at the party had weapons, and some of their weapons of choice were, there was somebody with a mace, like an actual mace, and it wasn't even somebody who was dressed as Hawkman or Hawkgirl, which would have made sense, but like somebody had a mace, there were swords. It was a little strange, but I guess in the larger scheme of things, if it was a party being thrown by villains, why wouldn't they all have some sort of weapons? It was weird that only one of them had a gun, and it happened to be a Tommy gun. I thought that was kind of amusing. The chase scene, it was cool because it blended some animation style. Like there obviously was a lot of anime influence here, and it was clear that there was a Japanese animation house that probably worked on it, or at least an Asian animation studio that worked on this film. But that's apparent from just the character designs of all of the different characters and things like that. But when you got to the car chase, there was like this. It was almost like a 3D version of 3D modeling kind of thing that reminds me of like some of the early some of the 3D elements that were included in like the animated series, Batman the animated series, where it was like it almost is that flat background, but then there's that 3D car. It's like you saw a lot of that stuff in the 90s, even in big animation movies too, like some Disney movies and things like that. So it's interesting to see that, because it has been a while since I've seen that in general. But I will say that the car chase, there was a lot of action, and it was really amping up what to expect from the film, because we'll get into some of the other action here in a little bit, but there's a lot of action in this film, and this does a perfect job of like setting it up and setting your expectations on what you can expect. Yes, this is a heist film. Yes, there's going to be plenty of quips and one-liners coming from Catwoman and the other characters in the film, but there's a lot of action, a lot more action than I think I was anticipating based off of even the trailer. When the trailer was released, I think it did a good job of communicating that it was going to be, Catwoman teaming up with Batwoman to take down these other people, but I didn't expect as much action from the film as there was, which was really cool to see. So then obviously at the end of the chase scene, we get the introduction of Batwoman. It's kind of hinted or teased that it could be Batman, because a Batarang thwarts Catwoman's burglary of the Emerald, and then we see a bat cycle chasing down Catwoman while she's being chased down by all of the henchmen, and then it's revealed that it's actually Batwoman. So then that kind of leads into the second act, where we get the setup of exactly why she's going to be involved in this, what exactly Leviathan is, why exactly they're trying to take them down. All of these different elements come together, and then there's a sequence that could only be described as pushing the boundaries when it comes to female interactions that we have probably yet to see in an animated film from DC. I don't think it was too over the top in any way, shape, or form. I just think it was probably more than anticipated. My son kind of looked at me like, "What the heck is going on?" when that scene popped up. So, it is what it is, and I don't want to go too much into the details. You go watch the film and find out exactly what I'm talking about. But then immediately we are going right into another action sequence with Catwoman jumping out of a plane and her having a face-off against Cheshire, and then we have Nosferatu, which is Cheshire's backup, and then Batwoman coming, and then there's like a 2-on-2 fight, which immediately then leads into a fight where the members of Leviathan, who have either powers or elements of helping out with the fight, they get involved, and then there's this big thing, and then there's like the slightest break before we get to the final act, which is much shorter in terms of everything going on. But just that second act had so much action going on. We went from a one-on-one to a double team, to basically a 2-on-4 plus the henchmen. So there was a lot going on in this massive fight scene that kind of wraps up action or act 2. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of some of the characters that were involved in the fight? The one that immediately jumped out to me, as I had no idea who it was Nosferatu, which is obviously a playoff of Nosferatu, but I still don't know if this is a character that's actually from the comics or not, because I've never seen this character. And there's other characters that were part of Leviathan that I was questioning whether or not they were actually part of the DC universe, or if these were original creations, because I didn't know who they were, because they decided to go outside the box of just using typical characters that we would expect to see within the Batman universe.
I don't know about Nosferatu. I meant to look that up. I don't remember ever seeing her in anything. Or, I mean, that's part of League of Shadows. I know League of Shadows can have ninja bats, but I've never seen one be actually named. As far as members of Intergang, and Leviathan, I know that there was one of the members was a Mannheim, and he had Intergang technology, and I think it's Bruno Mannheim, if I remember from Superman the animated series. But I don't think Bruno in this. He was like Boss Mannheim or something. There was one of them it was a woman who could like conjure like demons, and I don't think that's right. I think that all the other ones were really kind of made up for the movie to kind of lean into more of the Japanese like anime style. That's what I think.
Yeah, and the thing is, the movie has been out for just about a week now on Blu-ray, and surprisingly, there's not a wiki article for the film itself to be able to find out. There's a fandom article, but there's really nothing. So there's not a whole lot of talk in general about the film itself. The voice of Nosferatu is Zara Fazal, who's previously worked on other roles, including Young Justice, but she also voiced Talia al Ghul in the film as well. But there's not a lot of information to go off of. But as far as the action sequence, so like I said, there was a lot of action. My only issue, and I'll say this now because it kind of plays into all of the action that happens in Act 2. My only issue with the film was that there was just a lot of action. In some ways, I felt like almost there was a little too much action and not enough introduction of the characters. Not that obviously we don't need to be introduced to Catwoman, and obviously us as Bat fans, we don't need to be introduced to Batwoman, but at the same time, they kind of just breeze over the fact that Juliet Pennyworth shares obviously the same last name as Alfred Pennyworth, but I don't think most people are going to have any idea the connection of her other than the same name. So that to me seems odd. But then there's also King Faraday. He is a character from the DC universe. He just kind of briefly gets mentioned. Okay, fine. You don't have to go that far. But when it comes to some of the characters that are a part of Leviathan, outside of Cheetah, Black Mask, and Tobias Whale, which I think are pretty well known if you've seen other Batman media, with Black Mask and Cheetah being in actual live action films. Tobias Whale's been in Black Lightning, the TV series. So these characters have appeared elsewhere. But then you have the other 4 members of Leviathan, Nosferatu. Cheshire's been in other shows, or I should say other projects like Young Justice. She has a pretty big role, and she's big in the comics, but I don't think that a lot of mainstream fans are going to know who exactly that character is. So to me, I felt like there could have been a little bit better of introduction, or at least a little bit explanation of who some of they were. When they were introducing the Leviathan members, that felt almost forced, but I felt like it was needed because I didn't have any idea who any of those people were. So I appreciated the fact that they were like, oh yes, this is so-and-so, and then yes, this is so-and-so too. But my only issue was that there was just a lot of action, and it felt like there was a lot of moments where I just wanted a breath. Like I enjoy those quieter moments that let the characters like develop a little bit more. And I didn't think once that action sequence started, where after she jumped out of the plane, it felt like there was very little opportunity for them to build anything for the characters other than just hit the ground running, sprint, and explosions everywhere.
It was just a full-on action movie. No down at all. And I wonder if do you think that like Catwoman was almost kind of like powered up this movie, because like she mentions that she's trained by Lady Shiva as well, and usually Catwoman's one to kind of go around taking training and can take out all these high powered like machines and intergang apocalyptic technology, and can take out Cheshire, of assassins and things like that. I felt like, I know it's her movie, but I feel like she was kind of powered up a bit.
I feel like she was, but I wouldn't say that anything that happened with her was at least immediately, it did not come across as like they're powering her up. I mean, she definitely had some gymnastic abilities that, yes, they obviously play up the idea that she's very agile in the comics and things like that. Here, however, there was a couple of different sequences where you would almost feel like she at some point was a gymnast, even though based off of what we know from her past, she was not a gymnast because she grew up on the streets. So she didn't have those skills of being this like super athletic gymnast that would be able to do some of these positions. The idea of her being able to like climb up the wall with just her claws. I mean, she's very like lean. I could see that possible. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't think anything's immediately screamed out at me that she was more powerful or more powered up than she should be. But there was definitely some moments where you had to question it. I think that it can't. I think the reason I had little issue with that was because eventually when she faced off against Cheetah, there was no way she was beating Cheetah. Cheetah was going to take her out no matter what. Catwoman just got lucky. That's all it was luck. There was the lightning strike, and then there was, obviously Batwoman grabbing her. But that's the only reason that anything was able to happen in the first place, was because it just was pure luck that she managed to get out of that fight alive.
It was definitely strange to see Catwoman like with a sword. You really rarely ever see that. So that's kind of.
And they did say she mentioned that she was trained by Lady Shiva with the sword, which I thought was odd because I was like, I'm not sure why Lady Shiva would take the time to train Catwoman on that, but okay, whatever.
I'm sure they really didn't mention Batman at all, but I could have seen her saying like, yeah, Batman could train her with anything. But they don't even say Batman at all in this movie, which I thought was interesting, which I thought was for the better.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Absolutely. And let's talk about that for a second, because obviously there's a couple of hints. I mentioned earlier when the Batarang first shows up, you assume that it's Batman. And if you hadn't seen the trailer, obviously hadn't looked at the cover art for it, you would assume it's Batman. And then when Batwoman is in chase on the Batcycle, it is a silhouette where it's just clearly somebody wearing bat ears and has a cape on a bat cycle, so you again are getting this tease that it could be Batman. And when it's not, it's kind of surprising, except for the fact that obviously all the promotional material gives away that it's Batwoman. But I appreciated the fact that the few mentions of Batman, which you're right, he was never said by name. Catwoman did say something that I thought was perfect, especially for those of us who read the Tom King run of the comics, where Batwoman calls Catwoman Cat, and she's like, no, you can't call me that. Only he can call me that. And Batwoman was like, oh, I didn't realize it was such a touchy thing or whatever. And I appreciated the fact that, like, they hinted at who it was. You could assume as a fan who it was if you don't know it's Batman because you don't read the comics. But I appreciated the fact that, like, Cat is the name that Batman calls her, and that's like their thing. So that's why she got so upset. So I appreciated that. And then outside of that, I mean, like, there really wasn't a whole lot of other moments that even, like, reference Batman or, you know, anything like that. And I appreciated the fact that Batman didn't have to overshadow the character who basically was the titular character of the film with being Catwoman, because obviously Catwoman is tied to Batman so frequently. It's nice to see a film that can be its own thing. It doesn't have to be Batman's a supporting character for a film, or ends up taking basically is a main character of a film as well, with the character focus being on Catwoman and Batman still being there. I appreciated the fact that we could have a film that Catwoman is the main character. Batwoman is definitely a supporting character in this. She's not a main character in any way. And Catwoman is truly the main focus. And it was smart that they wrote it the way they did and didn't let that shadow of Batman kind of overshadow everything that was going on with Catwoman in this movie.
Sammy mentioned where, I think it's towards the end, where Catwoman says to Batwoman, like, I made a promise to him that I wouldn't, like, kill anyone, like, on purpose.
Yep.
I like that one. So Batman's making sure that she takes the no killing vow.
Yeah. So just as a update, I checked Nosferatu. It turns out it is a DC character. First appearance in Superboy from 1998. Clearly, that's one of the reasons why I've probably never heard of the character.
That's a very... Then, and the writer, Wiseman, he works on Young Justice.
Yep.
And Young Justice is kind of known for, like, their deep cuts. Like, they're going deep into DC, like, lore.
Yeah.
Not surprised that he's the one who's bringing out the deep cuts.
Yeah. All right, so then we get into the third act, which was basically the setup that they need to go after Cheetah, and then the whole sequence with Cheetah and Catwoman facing off against each other. I don't have a lot to say about the third act.
She takes on Solomon Grundy.
Ah, yes, I forgot about that. Yes, Solomon Grundy's there, and I completely forgot about that. But Solomon Grundy, it was a cool appearance, even if it was semi-brief in comparison. I appreciated the fact that he kept rattling off his nursery rhyme. That was cool. Although, so at the end of the film, obviously, so she takes the dynamite and stuffs it in his mouth, blows his head off, and then at the end of the film, we see the fact that his head is completely removed, but his body's still intact. And I was trying to comprehend at the end of the film if they were trying to imply that he was still alive, because they definitely implied that Cheetah was still alive. Cheetah literally fell on the stakes and was impaled multiple places on her body. They showed blood everywhere. And at the very end, they had her on a stretcher wrapped up so you couldn't see the holes in her body, but then they put the inhibitor collar on her to basically keep her from being able to use her powers as they took her away. And then they made the comment about, oh, well, we got to get this inhibitor collar on Solomon Grundy. And they're like, why? He doesn't even have a neck. And I kept thinking to myself, so is someone going to find his head and reattach it? I don't know exactly what they were trying to get there, other than just to say like, oh, wait, these people aren't dead. Don't think that Catwoman went and decided to kill them kind of situation, or that by proxy she was a murderer of these characters.
I wonder if they're setting up, like, maybe just to leave it open for a sequel in the future if they bring back Cheetah. And, like, because I know that Talia Talia's in this, spoilers, but if you're you're still listening. But she says, like, oh, I'm taking over Leviathan, another reason to hate Selina Kyle. But I do wonder if they're kind of maybe thinking about a sequel, or if this is well received, kind of leave it open just in case.
I feel like because it's Wiseman as the writer, I think that's on purpose. Because I feel like when he is involved with projects, he does leave things in a way where something could continue on. It doesn't have to be, but there's like these little hints. Young Justice is the best, the best way to describe what he does when it comes to that kind of stuff, where he leaves these little bits that can clearly be built on, but if they're not built on, it's not going to be a detriment to the series or the film or anything like that. I feel like the film ended in a really nice way where there was a comment from Talia, which I thought was kind of interesting, because immediately when Leviathan was introduced and it was like, oh, Cheetah is the head of it, I kept thinking, so they're going that route. What about Talia? And then obviously Talia shows up later on, and then she makes that comment at the end about how, well, I guess I have to step out of the shadows if I really want to run this thing. I can't have basically a front man anymore, or a front woman anymore, because that's just not going to work. So it was cool to see kind of that metamorphosis of Leviathan becoming what we know it to be from the comics, with a different person in charge at the beginning, but then the person that we expect to be in charge there at the end. But the other thing that was happening was Catwoman made a comment at the very end of the film to Batwoman about how she had this plan from the very beginning. She was in Spain on purpose to steal the emerald, specifically for a purpose to take down Leviathan, even though Batwoman and Interpol just assumed that Catwoman was there to just steal the jewel. That's what she was there for. She was not there for anything else. But Catwoman reveals that no, she wanted to take down Leviathan because Leviathan was trafficking young girls, and that's what she was ultimately trying to stop. And then the side part of that is that the money that she would get from stealing the jewel was going to help these girls, and that's revealed at the very end of the film. I thought it was a nice tie back to obviously Selina's past from the comics. They briefly mentioned Holly, which we can assume is Holly Robinson. But I thought, like, in general, the film did a really good job of kind of like wrapping things up, but also leaving things open, because she also makes a comment before she heads back to Gotham. She's going to head to London, clearly leaving it open for a sequel if they decide to do one, which I would not be opposed to. I thought this was a really good movie.
I was waiting for, like, in the middle of the movie, I was waiting for it to be revealed that the jewel that she was after was, like, actually kryptonite green.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if Leviathan has it, why do they have some little jewel that's so well guarded? So I was waiting for some reveal just from Interpol that it was actually kryptonite, but it never got there.
So speaking of the cast, I thought the cast was pretty well. The voices, I should say, were very well cast. I would say that Elizabeth Gillies or Giles, I'm butchering her name, but I'm sure that's going to happen with some of these names, because that's just what happens. Specifically, I thought you put it perfectly in your review on the website about how she had the perfect cockiness in her voice for this version of Selina Kyle.
You definitely want Selina Kyle to be cocky and confident, and always get the impression that she's 3 steps ahead of whoever she's talking to, and you definitely get that impression from her in this movie.
Yeah. The other one that stood out to me was Jonathan Banks as Black Mask. I thought he did a great job. Personally, I love Jonathan Banks as an actor from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He's a great actor. He's obviously done a lot of other things in the past as well, but his voice worked perfectly for Black Mask, and I would not mind seeing him return as Black Mask in the future. As far as the other ones, it's interesting because Lauren Cohan did the voice of Julia Pennyworth, but it was clearly Lauren Cohan who had an accent, because it wasn't her typical voice that we typically hear. And then some of the other ones, Keith David as Tobias Whale, that was very evident from the voice. I could tell it was Keith David. There wasn't anything special not special is not the right word. It's out of the ordinary, I should say. It's what you would expect to hear from Keith David. Stephanie Beatriz as Batwoman was dead serious, except for the part where Catwoman basically took her mask off. Then all of a sudden it was a completely different version of the character, and it was obviously like she was like she was under a trance from Catwoman at that exact moment.
I know Jonathan Banks from Community, that show from NBC a while back. I just got done rewatching that show, so right when I heard his voice, I was like, oh, he's from Community. Same with Keith David from Community, so it was a fun little reunion there. I think the voice of Cheshire was the same actress from Young Justice, so that's why I've been keeping her back for that. And because I recognize that voice right away too. Cheshire is such a big part of Young Justice.
Yeah. All right, so overall, I thought it was a good movie. I would say that if they were going to do a sequel, by all means, it would be interesting to see Catwoman potentially teamed up with other members of the Bat family, not necessarily Batwoman again or Interpol. But I guess the Interpol connection could work if she was staying, obviously, overseas. But I would like to see her potentially have another character that kind of gets assigned to help her. For the sake of what they were trying to accomplish, it makes sense that Batwoman was there and that they had that entire sequence with Interpol. But I think it would be cool to see another character kind of just around Catwoman, not Batman, because I think that this movie did a great job of not needing Batman, and I don't think it's necessary for that to happen again. So I think, like I said earlier, my only complaint is that there probably is a little bit more action, because the other thing is to keep in mind is this film only has an hour and 15-minute runtime. It's not like an action film that is 2.5 hours long. It's a film that's half of that, and there's a lot of action happening, which is cool to see, but you need just a little bit more time to let those character moments develop and build, so you appreciate the characters a little bit more than just having to have a round table of characters and introducing them 5 minutes before they become a relevant member of the fight.
Definitely. I really it was great to see Catwoman headline her own movie, and it was great to see her interact with someone other than Batman, because I feel like every time we see Catwoman, she's supporting Batman, so it was good to see her as her in charge. It's her movie, she's driving the story. Fun time if you're a big diehard Catwoman fan. It's a fun time to be a Catwoman fan, because you have this animated movie, you have Zoe Kravitz coming up in the Batman, and she looks like she's going to be brilliant in her take as Catwoman. I would definitely take a sequel of this, something, maybe not a direct sequel, but something, same animation, same writer, something like that. Story with her, with someone else from the Bat family, or anybody from the DC universe, really. I definitely like how DC's been doing the kind of off the path animated movies, kind of like Soul the Dragon, this movie, Man of Tomorrow's pretty good. Definitely like DC kind of going outside the box with these different type of animated movies.
I agree. And I can appreciate the different animation style, even if it's not something I typically look forward to. I appreciate the fact that they're experimenting with different animation styles too, because nowadays it seems like it's so easy to just do the same thing over and over again. And for a while, there was a huge stretch or almost every movie that they were producing for a good chunk of time was kind of this, it was the same character designs for every single film. And that's fine when you're doing a film that's, obviously following that same continuity and expanding on stories that have already occurred and things like that. But it's nice to see the outside the box stuff and the ability to kind of do something a little bit different. And that's really cool to see, but also to appreciate as well, because there's plenty of animation styles all over the world that DC is not touching, or I should say this: I'm not seeing it. I don't personally watch anime, so it's not something that I'm gravitated towards in general. But I know that just seeing trailers online for different projects that Netflix is doing, or other studios are putting out, there's a lot of different animation styles out there that have yet to, cross into the superhero medium. And I think it's cool to see something like this be able to happen and be unique in its own way, but also still feel like the same characters, even though it is a very different style.
Sure, upcoming talk about different styles, that DC is going to do a Super Sons movie, and that's more of I'm pretty sure I read this, where it's like almost like the Pixar animation, like the Toy Story.
Yeah, CGI, yeah. And that'll be one of the next films that we actually cover here, animated films, because one of the next ones that's supposed to be coming out is Green Lantern: Beware My Power. Very unlikely that we're going to cover that here on the podcast unless we're kind of having a lull of topics to discuss. But Battle of the Super Sons, that is, we will definitely be discussing here on the podcast in the future. And there's plenty of other projects that I'm sure will be coming out. It's surprising because there's actually not an official Batman film for the first time in a while, which I'm okay with them doing other things and taking risks with other characters and things like that. And obviously Super Sons will still have Damian in it because he is one of the Super Sons, but it's nice to see them kind of going outside the box and doing some other things that aren't necessarily the Batman universe. So that is Catwoman Hunted. Outside of the film releasing, as far as any news briefs, the only thing that I want to quickly mention is that tickets for the Batman are currently on sale. If you have not purchased your tickets, please take a quick second to head over to our website. We have affiliate links for Fandango, Alamo Drafthouse Cinema, and Atom Tickets. Purchasing your tickets through one of those affiliate links does get us just a small commission that helps support the website and the podcast and everything that we do at TBU. So please take a moment to do that. And with that is going to wrap up this episode of the Batman Universe podcast. If you are interested in any kind of news or original content or other podcasts related to Batman or the entire Batman universe, including stuff related to movies, TV, merchandise, video games, comics, and everything else related to the Bat fandom, be sure to check out our website, thebatmanuniverse.net. At thebatmanuniverse.net, you can find our social links to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Discord, YouTube. We're all over the place, and we have all kinds of content that we're constantly producing and sharing on our social platforms. So be sure to follow us on our social platforms to find all of that awesome Bat content that we have to offer. In addition to that, if you are interested in supporting this show as well as the other content that we produce at TBU, please take a second to consider supporting us on Patreon. You can find a link under the support section of the website, which can be found alongside a ton of affiliate links that we have that also help support us. And there's also a variety of other ways to support as well. In addition to that, if you can't necessarily support us monetarily, one of the ways that you can support us is by volunteering your time. We're always looking to add staff to our ranks to create original content for the website, whether it be comic reviews or original articles or reviewing other forms of media like the TV shows and things like that. We're always looking for people to join our staff. So get in touch with us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. With all of that being said, thank you so much for listening to this latest episode of the TBU podcast. BJ and myself, we will see you guys next time.